clearly some kind of bifurcation is happening. People who don't want to wake up, who want to comply with authority, who are afraid of their power, that don't understand that this time of awakening isn't about adopting a conspiracy theorist or having to shift your belief system in accordance with some new age BS. It has to do with your sovereignty, your authenticity, and your ability to unscramble your DNA so that you can begin to upgrade and capture and embody these greater spiritual gifts and abilities, which are going to get us out of this mess. So meanwhile, they're trying to push transhumanism, gender confusion, and this, bioweapons and everything under the sun to make sure we don't align with this. But nothing can destroy the organic ascension timeline. We can only distract ourselves away and allow our creative channels to be infected by these false narratives and psychological operations. So this is a big test for every soul right now. Are you going to choose to really be in alignment with what these times are about? Or are you going to fall prey to the bait that they're putting out there all the time to capture your soul and to modify you and degrade you to being less than human?
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
It's my great pleasure to welcome Laura Eisenhower to the show. Laura's been talking about her experiences regarding some unique recruitment efforts that began in around the 2006-2007 period concerning Mars, and she has been doing quite a lot of lectures, and we've actually done some webinars and so some seminars as well together. We've actually traveled to China together, her and John D'Souza and I, so that was very memorable. So welcome to the show, Laura.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks you for having me, Michael.
Well, you were raised in the Eisenhower family. You carry the name, of course. And so during your upbringing, is there anything you remember, anything that stood out about being an Eisenhower in Washington, D.C. or amongst VIPs where you and your family members would often be in attendance?
Right. Well, we didn't move to the D.C. area until I was 11 years old. Before that, my mom had been married to my biological father. He became a priest, and that's why I don't carry his last name. And my mom legally changed my name, even though she's the one with the last name Eisenhower. And a person doesn't always take their mother's last name, but it seemed appropriate, especially with my deep spiritual connection with Eisenhower and just what my mission entails as far as disclosing a lot of stuff that was held in secrecy. So as a child, I was constantly downloading because it's kind of like, how did I end up in this family? And insights were coming at me that made me very, very curious. So I went down a lot of rabbit holes pretty early on. And it was just basically the exposure to just Thanksgiving dinners, family reunions, and doing things just as a family. Not so much with the VIPs, although, like the christening of one of my cousins, Nixon was there. And I often would play at Julie Nixon and David Eisenhower's house and not realize that I was playing with Pat Nixon and my cousins, and that their grandparents were Richard Nixon and Pat Nixon, but also their great grandparents are Eisenhower. So it's very interesting growing up with Julie Nixon and David Eisenhower and my three cousins, because those kind of gatherings, would bring together the Nixon and Eisenhower family and a lot of people like that. So, some of the centennial dinners celebrating the anniversary of this presidency, there'd be like Arnold Palmer or Walter Cronkite or some like Sam Donaldson and Chris Matthews. And every once in a while, I would kind of introduce myself and begin to talk about my mission. But my mom was always kind of like, okay, quiet, because I'm all passionate. And like, I kind of go in directions that a lot of my family members haven't really gone in, as far as UFOs and ET government treaties and trying to get to the bottom of all that. That's not something we really ever talked about, but I can understand why they kind of avoided those topics. And it makes more sense now based on what I found out. But yeah, growing up was very interesting. When we moved to the DC area, I moved back to England when I was 12 for a year to be with my grandparents. But yeah, my mom, would throw some parties. And when we moved out to West Virginia, I remember Carl Sagan being there, and I let him sleep in my bed and I slept on the couch. And this was right around the time he had a really bad blood disorder right before he died. So, it's like, I want to sit there and like have these conversations, but yet I'm a teenager and and the grownups are all kind of talking. So I'm kind of like a fly on the wall, kind of listening, like what's going on. And then when my mom married the Russian, Rold Zagdeev, who was a science advisor to Gorbachev, when I was 16, we went to the wedding in Russia, and it was major paparazzi. There were political cartoons out on the two of them. And it's all written in my mom's book, Breaking Free, a memoir of love and revolution. And there's pictures of me and my sisters and a letter that she wrote to us before traveling a lot to Russia during my high school years. But it was a very normal family in a lot of ways. No Secret Servicemen, but my mom had Secret Servicemen when she was growing up. But yeah, I mean, we went to thrift stores. My mom had to work real hard to make a good living. And it's not like we sit on a bunch of trust funds. Everybody works real hard, but we're all supportive and loving to each other. And we have each other's back if there's an emergency. But I got really close to John S.D. Eisenhower, Eisenhower's son. We had a really, really close bond. He attempted to teach me how to fly a plane. And up until the end, yeah, I saw him at least once a year. And he would just whisper all sorts of funny things to me and stories that he knew that I would be kind of like tickled by, just in the relatability. And he said, I hate war, but these stories have to be told. And he's written a bunch of books, Bitter Woods, and a lot of different stories about his growing up very close to Eisenhower, going to these camps and, making sure that these things were documented. These were in photo albums. So I'd look in the photo albums growing up and I'd see pictures of the concentration camps with my great grandfather and grandfather visiting. And it was just really amazing. We kind of keep the heavier conversations out so that we can just enjoy family, and we just have a blast together. And I really love every family member, and I feel a really close bond, even though it's been a while since I've seen them. And yeah, and my mom, has been the most centered, like in DC. She created the Eisenhower Institute and the Eisenhower Group, and was a political analyst connected to Soviet Russia, Cold War, end of Cold War kind of stuff. And that's kind of where she has carried on the legacy in a lot of ways. And we all kind of have different roles, and we support one another. But these more intense conversations kind of get almost like a little bit too lit up, because there's so many layers to all of this that sometimes it's a little bit too intense to start getting into the ET part of it. But I just do lectures on it, and I've been researching pretty much my whole life, trying to get to the truth. And it's been wonderful to have you as a friend and colleague who's been doing similar with touching upon things in his administration on top of all the other research you've done, and people like Dan Willis and some of the contactees like Elena and Alex, and meeting Dan Cooper have really helped me to kind of come to some major conclusions that are very different than the narrative that was being steered, that I was open-minded to being possible, that maybe he did sign these treaties. And I know I'm kind of going further than your question, but we'll kind of get to that, I'm sure. So
yeah, we will. We'll get to that. So essentially then, during your childhood, and you're very interested in esoteric topics. I don't know if you're talking about extraterrestrial life or anything, but at a certain point, you become interested in UFOs. So was that before or after the Mars recruitment? So why don't you kind of like give us a little bit of background to that?
I've always been interested, just very kind of multidimensional, kind of like traveling all over the cosmos. I had some sort of wild dreams when I was young that related to the future and timelines, and just, a particular role that I'd be playing during this particular window period that we're in, even though it's all the assaults that the human race is going through make it feel like we're not really heading anywhere, but we are, of course. And so I just really began to study galactic history from a young age. It got major accelerated though in 2006, 2007, when I really got a background peek into things like MJ12 and the Aviary and the group that was responsible for trying to bring me in. The whole concept of UFOs and ETs, and the negative ET agenda, and the benevolent beings connected to the guardian races and some of the others throughout history. It just helped me connect a lot more dots. But I was always interested in those subjects, being a very out there kind of person. When I studied astrology and medical astrology, I attracted a lot of clients that were abductees and contactees, and people that have survived, like SRA and MK Ultra. So it really kind of like took it further than what one will read on the internet, because it's like, okay, here's a real person telling their story that you get to know a lot more intimately. And so forming a lot of friends with like Kathy O'Brien and Laura Worley and somebody named Derek, who are processing through many, many altars and these kind of experiences, have helped connect the dots between the UFO ET component, the deep state, the Illuminati, the Cabal, and also Eisenhower's position in all this. A lot of people think he signed us out, or sold us out, or they think we're an Illuminati family. And so really paying attention, doing hypnoregression, and really using tools like I Ching and astrology to gain self-knowledge to see, okay, well, what has my experience been? What are my agreements with Eisenhower too? Because, we go way back before this lifetime. I've always been answering or asking these kind of questions. And then, understanding like Val Thor, I think I was learning more about him after 2006, but that was always on the radar. And I think it really started to hit me at the age of 9 when I was at the grocery store with my mom, and I see a Weekly World News article, which is a joke newspaper, that says Eisenhower met with ETs. And I'm like, no, I think there's something to this. So just starting off like from really, really young, I was getting a lot of downloads, a lot of connection with him, guiding me towards uncovering this information. And then of course, 2006, 2007 was really when it became much stronger of a reality. Why do they want me off planet? I wasn't in these projects. I'm not a survivor of MK Ultra or secret space programs like a lot of our friends and colleagues, but I got a great understanding of this multi-layer secret space program thing. And my recruitment was to be a permanent colonist. And so I went down a lot of rabbit holes and connected a lot of dots, particularly after that time period. But I was already interested in the subject, almost like being prepared. And it was preparing me to know how to say no and get out of it. And it was very, very difficult to get out of the recruitment. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a lot more intense than that. So through the help of dreams and higher contact on some level, and just connection to God, source, and Mother, Goddess, Earth, those are been sort of what I've connected most with, and understanding the multi-dimensional layers of many races and the origins of these races, based in learning a lot about galactic history, particularly Keylontic science and Lisa Renee, have been incredibly helpful in understanding this a little bit more, with a lot more advanced terminology than I was using as I was getting the downloads growing up. I'm not as sophisticated, so I've learned a lot. And in my presentations, I'm able to articulate it, with that kind of universal truth and information that I feel is so resonant that I just really feel an affinity to it. And so I cite it a lot in my presentations. And Lisa and I have become really, really good friends. We talk regularly, trying to process the madness of the world, and we become really close. So that really helps. And she's phenomenal. So that's really helped along the way. But yeah, this has been a lifelong thing for sure. But I haven't been taken off into ships or had those kind of memories like some people. I wouldn't say that I have like a contact thing going on, but I know Val Thor has sent some messages through Elena to me. And sometimes I'm just like, will you come and take me up on a ship so we can talk like one-on-one? But they'll probably like realize that I won't want to be dropped back off here, even though I love Mother Earth and I love community and I love our friends and I love all of you. But, the madness on this planet can be very difficult, as just what we're seeing in the world today can be very, very difficult to wake up to.
Well, one of the things that I found very interesting about you telling me and others about this recruitment effort in 2006 was that those that were trying to recruit you were very interested in your bloodline, obviously the Eisenhower bloodline, and they were also interested in your twin sons. And so, how did all of that kind of like make you someone that they really went to great efforts to get you to consent to be part of this Mars colony?
Right. And they tried to present it in a way that, oh, this is for your protection. But it was very manipulative, because when I said, I don't want to go, I have a strong mission here on Earth, and they only really let me relate to the partner that they set me up with. They used looking glass technologies to locate us in past lives, because they knew that we had a connection, and that if they were able to bring him into the project and kind of mind control him and use these dark technologies on him to sort of split him, this is when I really learned about handlers and altars, and I was realizing like, oh, wow, even though he's a familiar soul, he's being used, and they targeted him to target me. I mean, they targeted him to target him as well. So I wasn't able to talk to them directly. And when he admitted to me that we didn't meet in the natural, organic way like I thought, when we ran into each other at a festival, they said that they sent him on a mission to find me, and I had been tracked, and they were just monitoring where I was at. He said, they sent me to get you and bring you in. And I said, well, I don't want to go. And he's like, well, you don't have a choice. They're going to take you anyway. Basically, they're going to kidnap you. But every time he would disclose truth or why, he would have to undo all the batteries of our computers and phones, because he said, we're being bugged, we're being tapped. I can't tell you this information. And so he would have to like hide the batteries and all this stuff to be able to disclose anything. It was almost like a part of him was his true essence and soul was kind of leaking through, trying to say, okay, I have to warn you of what they're doing to us. but then he'd go back into like an altar or put all the electronics back together and then deny saying anything at all. And he said that people are being killed. There's web cameras all over. This is when I was living in North Carolina, and we had gotten sort of engaged with a Celtic handfast, and my friend Kylea was a part of all that. And I just started to research really heavily all the people that he was talking about and what the Aviary is, and this group of people that I didn't have direct access to. And a lot of that information had been covered up, but I kept researching and researching, and finally found a link between some of these names and a lot of sordid things that they've done. And then later on, a website came out about the Aviary, which have members like John Alexander and Hal Puthoff and a whole bunch of others, and how they have code names, which I remember when I was going through it all, like Chicken Little, Owl, Penguin. They all had like these code names. They gave him a code name. But anyway, he was going through abduction scenarios and thinking that he was having a telepathic communication with an ET race that was encouraging us to go to Mars. So he was a well-intentioned person being used to try and make this look good. And I was breaking it down and seeing through it. And I remember when you and I talked, I was out on the golf course. You were one of the first people I talked to when I was beginning to make this public. And I was talking really fast, like I still do. And I was just like, trying to, really just protect me and the kids, because when they realized I wasn't going to go, and I had some dreams that really just helped me to know what to do and how to navigate. When they knew that they couldn't have me, everything kind of erupted. There was a lot of targeting, a lot of electronic weaponry, which I've had my whole life, psychotronic weaponry and these different things trying to control my path. But it sort of began to protect me because I was giving it a voice. And I tried to rescue him from it. And they really did have him. And they really did own him. And every once in a while, like when he would flip into a different personality, there'd be some kind of phone call, and it seemed like they were giving him codes over the phone, and he would just change. And I was like, okay. And then I did a lot of research about all of this and got to the bottom of who this group, the Aviary, are. And I wouldn't say that all of them are negative, but a lot of them are, like Richard Doty, who's a major disinformation guy. He was a part of it. And a lot of, different individuals that have been in the UFO field that are kind of questionable. I don't want to smear anybody, but from what I've heard, some of these are the major disinfo agents connected to MJ12. And supposedly the Aviary is kind of a branch of it. They consider themselves a think tank. Like if you look at the surface definition of the Aviary, it's a lot different than what it actually is. They're responsible for my labs, gang stalking, psychotronic weaponry, and all these things that I was picking up on. And 10 years later, somebody came out with a website validating the things that I was sensing. But it was really hard. Like, what if I'm wrong, and maybe I should go to Mars, because it was all set up, which I think relates back to Alternative 3 and Eisenhower's administration of needing to colonize Mars in the event of catastrophe to protect the human genome, which isn't a bad intention. But when we see the infiltration of the secret space programs and some of these characters, it's like, well, this isn't trustworthy. And Andrew Pishago and I processed a lot of it. So I think it had to do with being in the Eisenhower bloodline, them knowing that I was going to expose and disclose things that they want held in secrecy, that they couldn't really control me with the weapons or kind of like keep me shut down. So they're like, okay, well, what else do we do with her? We can't seem to offer. We probably shouldn't offer. It might draw more attention to this family or to her or some of the topics that I would already brought to light. I don't know. But it just seemed like they wanted me off this earth and either to take me to Mars to use me. I don't know. They have breeding programs. I don't know if that was really the intent with me. I think they just had a select few and they had interest in the bloodline, but they also had interest in removing me from the planet to not do my mission, I believe. And that's kind of what they said to me. They were aware of my website and the stuff that I had already been writing. Previous to 2006, I had already been publishing articles and talking a lot about the Christ Sophia stuff in our galactic history. I was writing a lot about that before the recruitment. So I think that put me on the radar on top of the Eisenhower bloodline, that whole exposing of our true DNA and divine template. I mean, they don't want humanity to wake up to that because that's part of the Great Awakening is for us to take our power back and begin to, really get switched on. And I think they just want somebody like me, to be quiet, but also maybe to use whatever they can connected to whatever I might carry in my genetics because of Eisenhower. They might want to have used it or maybe, sometimes they steal genetic codes in order to create hybrids or create, something that will have maybe false memories. Because I've had a lot of secret space program people that tell me these sort of things that they do, to implant false memories, to sabotage maybe somebody who, is representing it in more of an authentic way. And as they heal and get to their authentic source, they awaken to this divine inheritance that we all carry. It's just, I think that there's a lot of emphasis and manipulation of people claiming to be the reincarnation of Jesus or Mary Magdalene. And I've tried to dispel all that and help remind people that we all carry these archetypes. And sometimes it gets real weird when people overly identify with it and become territorial, when it's something that we should all celebrate and support in one another. And so I ran into a lot of that and a lot of attack and people coming at me just because I have Magdalene in my middle name, which my father gave me, and I feel a strong identification to it. I've never made any claims to be the reincarnation of anything, but I know because I am kind of a conduit for it or a voice for it, they really want to suppress the divine feminine energies. And particularly in men, the divine masculine has gone through so much hell and has had to heal so much. So it's really about sacred union and unity and healing both the divine masculine and feminine. And yeah, I just don't think that they want that kind of voice out there. And if I have something in my DNA that, puts that kind of leadership blood in my system, and they know I have a big mouth and I'm not going to ever shut up, it's kind of like, let's just take her to some other planet and get her out of here. And I know they're threatened by, the way we put our heads together and our research together. And I know you've had to go through so much targeting and censorship, and your story about American University. It's really hard to put out this kind of material. So that's why I think they wanted me off there. And, I don't think my genetics might have something to do with it as much as I was going to be exposing stuff. Alternative 3, the very things that they exposed me to, they didn't want me to talk about. So it kind of like bit them in the ass, or it kind of shot them. They shot themselves, in the foot, but they really didn't know what else to do because I wasn't going to shut up anyway. So their hopes were, we're going to use this man. She's obviously got an affinity with him. She'll fall in love. She'll go anywhere he wants to go. So of course she's going to go to Mars because they can't mind control me. So they're like, okay, we can manipulate her heart though, because she's all about the fairy tale and the sacred union. So they use looking glass technologies to locate somebody that I had that kind of union with in previous lifetimes. That's why it was so difficult to let go of him, because it wasn't just some agent that got me to fall in love. This was somebody I knew and had a very strong familiarity with. And learning about looking glass technologies and how they're able to look into the future. I think that they saw what potentially was going to happen on this mission, and they're doing everything they can to shut it down. And of course, with the latest assaults on humanity, it's making it difficult for all of us and star seeds and, awakened people to put this out. They're trying to shut us up, but it's not going to work. So
yeah, exactly. So one of the things that was very kind of interesting in terms of my awakening to all this material, when I first started doing my research in 2001, was when I found out that there were all these people talking about President Eisenhower meeting with extraterrestrials at Edwards Air Force Base in 1954. So I wrote a paper about it. And then my first book, Exopolitics, the Exopolitics, Political Implications of Extraterrestrial Life, that came out in February of 2004. And a Washington Post writer interviewed me, Peter Coulson, and he wrote an article about President Eisenhower's meeting with extraterrestrials based on my book and my research. And he called it the whole truth and nothing but the truth, something, just a twist on the idea that President Eisenhower went to meet with extraterrestrials, or he went secretly to have a meeting with a dentist because he had a toothache. That was the story. But that essentially got me sacked from American University, because the university didn't want to know about this whole exopolitics field. They thought it was nonsense, and they actually said, put it in writing, that this had no place within the university, this kind of conspiracy stuff. So that got me actually sacked, that research into President Eisenhower's meeting. But
oh my gosh.
you saw it at some point and you contacted me, I think, what was it, 2006, 2007, and began talking. So, how did my research, or, how did you find out about Eisenhower meeting with, well, you already mentioned that you saw an article. So, what is it that motivated you to get in touch with me, and what was it that I had kind of revealed that maybe helped you better understand what had happened?
Right. And I know a lot of that has changed. I mean, I was doing a lot of presentations about, the Greada Treaty and what possibly happened. And that's changed since, Elena has come into but I mean, these meetings still happen. It's just, it was done behind his back and they used him as a scapegoat and put the blame on him. So the research is correct, except for it wasn't Eisenhower. He did meet with Val Thor. But what I've learned is that there was an unconditional surrender agreement in 1952, around the time that the UFOs flew over the Capitol, where the negotiations took place and there was some kind of, surrender under Truman's administration. And it made it impossible for Eisenhower to have any meetings with the Greys or even the Nordics, from what I've come to understand. But the blame was placed on him. And he was always known as the president that sold us out, when in fact the Greada Treaty originated 10 years previous. And the the governments and the ET relationships started in the 1930s. And of course, the negative ET agenda goes way back, Anunnaki and the Orion Wars, and way, way before. It's just a step down and change in form. So, but when I was, privy to the Greada Treaty and the ET government treaties, and I was speaking about it, I don't know how I came across you. I was in such survival. I know that, like, my friend Kylea helped connect me with Alfred Lambermont Weber. I think I talked to you first. And I just knew that you were just willing to investigate this stuff and research this stuff. And I, for some reason, thought that you found me or contacted me. But if I found and contacted you, I think I was just like trying to find people that were discussing all of this and that might take me seriously, and I think I was just in desperation. I'm like, maybe I can get a hold of Michael and he can help me figure out what the heck I'm supposed to do. And then, I'll learn a lot from his research. And as we're continuing on this path, we're learning a lot more, from others. And sometimes, that means, I have to go back and change presentations or update the information. And I keep having to change my book because I learn more every day. And sometimes I feel like I'll never be able to put my book out. It's been so targeted. And now my software's messed up. I can't even do any more edits. So I'm in another kind of rut. And maybe it's to take time to make sure I have a few things figured out, but it's not going to be so much about, Eisenhower and that history, but it's going to touch upon it and some of the new things I've learned. But it's sort of like I don't have fixed beliefs. Whatever new stuff I've learned, I might find out, okay, no, that's not actually accurate for whatever reason. And it's not to, say anything negative about the people bringing that information in. It's just a very complicated thing because there's been layers and layers of disinfo to cover up a surrender that happened with the Nazis, and not under Eisenhower's watch. It was under Truman's administration, from what I've learned. So these are just things I have an open mind to. They make sense. And when I asked my family, did he go off to these meetings? And it's very hard for me to talk to my family about it. They really said, no, he did go to a dentist. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? Because, and there's a chance that he did attend one of the meetings. But what Elena says is that even if he attended one of the meetings, he didn't sign a treaty. MJ-12 signed the treaty. Even Alex Collier talks about the moon unit of the NSA responsible for the treaties. And I quoted him way back, but I was sort of sharing every possible scenario, without being too fixed on one particular narrative. I wrote a big article before I went to Italy. Pinotti put on, a major UFO guy in Italy. And in that article, I was just kind of writing every possibility of what might have happened. And I still kind of do that because I really wasn't there and I really don't know. But I can only do my best. And I just, I flipped through your book and I was just like, right on. And then you just keep whipping out more and more books. I can barely keep up with it. I'm not a great reader, but you've been my go-to. And I've quoted you a ton of times, particularly your information about the secret space programs and, all the people you've worked closely with and how flexible you are when you might think or feel that something's happening to the narrative. You're always kind of there to protect the truth while researching and analyzing with an open mind. So you're always kind of my go-to person because I trust you on that level. And that level of integrity. So,
yeah, well, it's very important that we always are open to different perspectives, and if something comes in that's kind of like contrary to what we believed before, then you go with it, whatever the evidence, wherever the testimonies take you. So, one of the things that I remember about the Eisenhower ET meetings was Bill Cooper was kind of like the first one, the former Navy intelligence briefing officer, or NCO, he was the first one to talk about Eisenhower meeting first with friendly Nordics,
Yep.
and then these tall gray extraterrestrials, the Ebands or the Nebu, and that the agreements were made with the Nebu. And of course, everyone assumed that was because of Eisenhower. But now, more recently, we found out there was a 1989 Defense Intelligence Agency briefing document that was leaked by Heather Wade, and what that said was that actually there was a meeting in 1954 with these friendly human-looking extraterrestrials, and an agreement was reached, a treaty was reached, and Eisenhower was part of that. And so that was interesting, because it meant that, well, so how could it be then that you have at the same time the top levels of the American government making agreement with both human-looking extraterrestrials and tall greys, Ebands? And so that kind of like tells us that, well, what probably happened is that Eisenhower was part of these agreements with the human-looking, or made like agreements in principle that, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to work with you. But then MJ12 went behind his back and made agreements with the Ebands, because Alan Dulles was the director of the CIA, and John Foster Dulles was the Secretary of State. So they had a lot of clout. And so they were working with the Germans in Antarctica. So that was the direction they took. So you had like a schizophrenic setup. And this is one of the things that I talk about again and again in my Secret Space Program book, that in a way the American military establishment has been schizophrenic, because one faction has been working for decades with the Greys, with the reptilians, with the Germans out of Antarctica, and another faction has been working with these human-looking groups, the Galactic Federation, and that's the US Navy.
Right. Well, okay, so there's a USMC special section that Randy Kramer talks about, and Dan Cooper, not William Cooper, refers to it as Ike's Force, and the origination of the White Hats, and also the Earth Alliance, and the Sphere Being Alliance, and how Val Thor helped connect Eisenhower with the Sphere Beings that Corey Good talked about, putting an outer barrier in 2014. But then that kind of got weird, and I haven't really followed him. I don't know really what he's sharing, but so Dan helped to validate all that, except where it's all going is a little bit questionable with how some of these narratives are being steered, or some of the infiltrations to make that information a little bit difficult. But supposedly Eisenhower went covert and started to work with Val Thor and his link to these higher councils, because he was kind of rogue. Most of these other beings supposedly made an agreement to not interfere, and that there was a questionable thing with the Nordics, that they weren't really friendly. They were part of the ICC Draco Nazi alliance, because some of the Nordics were working with the Dracos. So I think there was trust issues at first with the Nordics, but from what I heard, Eisenhower wanted to side with them. From what we hear from some testimony, like from William Cooper, and Phil Schneider talks about Eisenhower meeting with ETs in the first contact, and then, with the Greys. And these are really credible whistleblowers. So I asked Dan, how could these whistleblowers be sharing disinformation if they were there, or they're blowing the whistle? And he explained it, that these higher levels, especially starting in 1947, when they put the laws above the president and made everything top secret, even the whistleblowers weren't given the true information. And they did their best to expose what they thought should be exposed, but they weren't getting the full picture, because that full picture has been the most top secret thing that they've wanted to keep us from, which has to do with the surrender to the Nazis and MJ12 doing this behind his back. And so Eisenhower supposedly developed these things to put in motion to protect us in these times, to safeguard our liberties. But as we see in his final speech, we have to be a knowledgeable citizenry. Nobody's really going to be able to, through the government, give us true disclosure. We're going to have to educate ourselves as humans and become sovereign and really strong, and see what games are being played, even with some of this disinfo. So he helped kind of explain all that. I'm still really confused, but I do know, through Project Paperclip and through, like you said, the schizophrenic stuff, he was surrounded by so-called allies and friends that were keeping him from this information. And then when he realized what was going on and who he was surrounded by, what MJ12 was doing, how they were keeping him from the information, he wanted to invade Area 51. Supposedly he did launch an invasion to Dulce. And this isn't the Dulce Wars that Phil Schneider was involved in. This is previous to that he tried to take them out, but wasn't very successful. So there's all these things that he tried to do that we don't hear about, that is finally coming to light. But obviously an agreement did happen. And it's almost like the treaties don't really need to be signed because they're already in alliance with these human hybrids or the deep state. To me, it's just a way to rewrite history, to put the blame on him, to make the good guys look bad. And they can just kind of hide in the background running this dark agenda while, they're blaming, the wrong people. That a lot of people are forgiven. Like, maybe his hands were tied, or maybe they, maybe he felt like he had no choice but to sign the treaty. So people have been very compassionate to that possible narrative, but a lot of people have been very nasty. I've gotten mail for the last 12 years of people just saying, your great grandfather sold us out, and, how evil he is and how evil I am. And, it's been really, really difficult to carry that weight, and then realizing, wow, none of it's even probably true. And it makes sense. And I know that his presence doesn't leave me alone. He keeps encouraging me to dig deeper. And I'm always like, okay, I know there's more, and I'll keep digging deeper. And then the synchronicities help align us with people like Elena. It was really amazing how I met her. And then I got to write the foreword to the book. And I know you did a testimonial or something. So I think Val Thor was the main person that Eisenhower had contact with. Everything else, I don't feel he had a direct link with. They might have had, it looked like he was there at the meetings because there is some documentation, there is some kind of evidence, or maybe even pictures, but we know that they can manipulate those things. And maybe, they had some kind of technology to make it appear like he was there just to cover their tracks, because, Elaine had a really great quote yesterday. It's not that they don't want us to know about ETs. They just don't want us to know that we've been sold out to them. And they're going to hide the fact that it's them. They want us to think it's Eisenhower. And I'm just so glad and relieved to finally have these breakthroughs, because it's a lot to carry, and it's a lot to be trolled for as long as I've been trolled, and also trolled about him being a war criminal and starving all these German soldiers. And just a lot of that heaviness. Eisenhower's evil. He's a war criminal. And Mark Feldman, who's a historian, a very, very renowned documentary person, exonerated Eisenhower, and that whole Bach book, Other Losses, he completely did a documentary saying how all those things were impossible, which helps to exonerate Eisenhower as well. So it's been really heavy to help clear him of this very troubled, rewritten history that makes him look terrible, when he's somebody who actually loves humanity and did all he could and set things in motion that will hopefully help us in these times. I know we hear about white hats. I think there's a lot of disinformation about, like, the mass arrests and, the underground bases being cleared out. I think there's a little bit of misinformation when it comes to what the white hats are up to, but I think there's definitely something in place connected to positive military, positive ETs, benevolent ETs connected to Val Thor, and what happened after Project Moonshadow, what Randy Kramer talks about with the USMC special section. So there's still a lot to learn. I'm kind of exhausted with the rabbit holes, but I mean, at least I feel like we've gotten somewhere, right?
Yeah, no, well, there's a lot of information there that, that's to be unpacked. But, a lot of people might not know about Val Thor and how he was like a guest of the Pentagon for 3 years, from 1958 to 1961. And of course, there were subsequent meetings, and people like Elena have said that they've met Val Thor recently, who's still very interested. So, do you believe that during those years, 1958 to 1961, which was actually the critical time when Eisenhower grew very disenchanted with MJ-12, and of course, everyone knows about his famous farewell speech on January 17, 1961. So, was it because of the kind of conversations he was having with Val Thor, his whatever betrayal that he felt because MJ-12 had kind of signed these agreements, that's really why he came out with his farewell speech? Do you think that the real reason he said what he said about the military-industrial complex was that he was really talking about MJ-12?
Yeah, and all the deep layers of, the deep state, and and all these, how they've, become a part of MJ-12, all the different secret societies, 3-letter organizations, and how that all kind of links up, like the Bilderberger meetings and just all those different names and titles, and how, a lot of them sit on the council of MJ-12 making decisions with the alien technology and the ET technology that is basically more geared towards social engineering, mind control, geoengineering, chemtrails, and all these different tactics, like Project Mockingbird and all these MK Ultra projects to put people in influential positions that have alters, that are politicians and celebrities that are involved in things like SRA, and they're victims themselves often, or they've been blackmailed, or they're, willingly participating. So all of that has been where this ET technology has gone. And I think Val Thor formed a very strong friendship with Eisenhower and helped him to understand that, like, we didn't win the war. It's obvious we didn't win the war. History books are being rewritten. There's this deeper shadow government that is really trying to run things. So I think they formed an alliance of, okay, well, what do we do now? All we can do is empower the public, warn them, and guide them towards self-knowledge and finding the truth, because apparently every effort that Val Thor made to help humanity got shut down by Joint Chiefs of Staff and whoever was surrounding him that was kind of the shadow government controlling things, did not allow this alliance or what they were agreeing upon to help the human race to succeed. They vetoed it, they shut it down, whatever they did. I don't know how they had the power to do that and how the president didn't have the power over that, but that just goes to show where the government structure is and how the shadow government, really began after Eisenhower to create these grooming programs to groom presidents, like Obama, and like things we hear about with the Mars training program and the three-letter organizations grooming presidents and creating Manchurian candidates and sleeper agents. So everything's a mess. It's impossible to know who to trust when it comes to any kind of leader right now. And that's all a part of how they've utilized this ET technology to mind control, trauma-based mind control, influential people so that they can run their agenda through them. And so I think Val Thor, helped Eisenhower realize this and was a part of helping him to connect with the sphere beings to protect humanity with that outer barrier and different things that they've done, and to set up these other things that are the positive branches of whatever secret space program there is, because the Earth Alliance is the enemy of the Draco Alliance, the ICC Nazi Draco Alliance, apparently, right? And they're doing all they can behind the scenes, but ultimately humanity has to wake up. As we know, nobody's going to save us. But because our higher self is linked to these benevolent ETs that we hear about, I think it's a team effort, and we have a lot more support and assistance than we can imagine. We just have to work together and stay very discerning as well, because they have a lot of technology that can create holographic, false, kind of ascended master or benevolent looking ETs that actually are not true benevolent ETs, even though they appear to be that way. There's a lot of imposters, and the astral plane is a mess as far as all sorts of imposters that people are channeling. I believe that the people that we work with and talk to are having direct, authentic experience, but I know there's a lot of imposters too. And that whole problem, reaction, solution, I'm a little worried about, that things are going to get so bad that the so-called benevolent ETs are going to come and help, but they might not be the benevolent ones. And so I think, a lot of us are strong enough in our research and in our discernment to know the difference. And we're going to really protect humanity from any potential false disclosure or imposter beings. And that's my goal, is that, we really come together and we work on this as best as we can, because, there's a lot of information wars, and we have to just take it one step further and not get caught in the divide and conquer. And that's what I love about working with you and everybody else that's, kind of helping in all this and playing a huge role, that it doesn't sink into that. I always feel like we can have really mature conversations, and some of, the conversations as well with Dan Willis and how much you guys have figured out, I just feel like there's going to be a lot more breakthroughs, but we have to be really, really careful too.
Definitely. Yeah. We have to be very discerning, and it is a problem. There's so much information out there. And that's one of the criteria I use, is to look at, people who actually have direct physical contact and are stable and have a lot to lose by coming forward, as opposed to those that maybe are channeling, or maybe they, maybe deluding themselves, or want to believe that they're having experiences, but they're actually getting radio transmissions because there is that technology, mind interference that's happening.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that in 2020, your mother, Susan Eisenhower, wrote a book called How Ike Led. And it's a very kind of mainstream book in terms of looking at Eisenhower's leadership during the Second World War and during his presidency, and what were the qualities he had, the principles he used to make his decisions. Now, I know there's a lot of heavy hitters in terms of the the conventional world that wrote reviews for your mother's book. Henry Kissinger, the Wall Street Journal, Robert Gates, the Secretary of Defense, they're all praising the book. So clearly the mainstream liked the book. But if you were to write a chapter for that book, what would you add in terms of Eisenhower's leadership skills, or what you know of him through your own experience, your own communications?
Oh, cool. Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to get into that. That's a huge part of my book, is just connecting with him since childhood and recollections of things that we've done together in the past. How I found out that he was briefed that a descendant would be born to help bring to light things that he wasn't able to on a public scale, that he was being briefed about that before I was even born. And Project Pegasus was talking about me in 1972 before I was born. So there's somehow that they were aware of my soul before I even incarnated. And that's the case for a lot of people that are pre-targeted, but it's a little bit different when you're born into a project versus something like the Eisenhower bloodline with this particular, mission. So I would say, first off, I probably wouldn't have the people that she had write testimonials, like right on my book, because I don't trust some of them, but I'll just keep that out of there. Some of the people that wrote on the back, I'm just like, oh no. But there's so much compartmentalization. And my mom is like, I've watched her very closely throughout my whole life, and she's an incredible woman, incredibly intelligent, big heart. She's incredible with my sons, and she's always been like, just always had my back. But I think, kind of, and I don't want to say anything that tarnishes any of this, but I think Eisenhower is sort of dealing with similar, where you don't really know who your enemies are. And there's a lot of people that might seem to be your friend and seem to be okay that maybe aren't. But there's a lot of people that used to be dark that have turned to the light. So I don't know, and maybe these kind of individuals have, because a lot of people have broken out of even their 20 and back, or being in the Dark Alliance. They've been able to flip it around and not serve that darkness anymore. So maybe some of these individuals were able to break free of it. And she has pretty good judgment. So, but that was a little weird, because I don't know what to think of some of those people that you just named, but that's just kind of where I'm at. It doesn't take away from, what an incredible author she is. I haven't had a chance to finish the whole book, but if I were to add anything about his leadership, I would just say his tenacity, his passion, how much he gave credit to those that fought in the war as being the real heroes. He had a lot of humility, a lot of strength, a lot of gentleness. And I saw that a lot in my grandfather, his son. And I just picked up on a lot of who Eisenhower was through getting to know his son so, closely. And just how they're not into war. They're all about peace. But, my granddad also served in war. And it's very rare that a descendant of a president would serve in army. I think one other did. I think a Kennedy did. But, just really putting oneself out there for the good of humanity. Being a 5-star general, the way he was raised on a farm, how much his parents didn't really want him to go into like West Point and into the military to pursue, being a general. I mean, he was born with this incredible mission and passion. And I felt similar growing up, like, oh my God, what is this? These downloads coming to me, or just seeing into kind of the future, like what I'm here to do, along with, other people in unity, how we're all kind of doing this together. And that's what I like, is that he knows that it can't be up to one single person, that there's many leaders among us, and this whole governmental structure really doesn't work. And he had some really incredible quotes, like, the people want peace so bad that the governments better get out of their way and let them have it. He knew how corrupt the government system is, and was really just encouraging of people coming into, a leadership role within their own lives. And then some of the channels that have come through since he's passed, which I don't know are legit, but I got the goosebumps and it felt like truth, that he's just saying, so many people don't believe in themselves, or they give up on their missions. They have a lot of self-doubt because there's so much projection and misunderstanding of these advanced children, that he's just really encouraging, don't ever give up. He sees the leadership and value in other people. And to me, he really stood for unity consciousness. He really helped to keep the spiritual element alive, and putting like, in God we trust on the dollar bill. And, to some people that might not mean much. I know he got wrapped up in some things being in his position that I think he later saw through, that were just part of like the inauguration or the initiation that a president goes through. But I think his leadership and being able to see through it and do the right thing, do everything he possibly could to safeguard our futures, and just, like boldly going into these concentration camps and doing all he could to, save people from all of this. And I think, there's a lot more Holocaust and genocides that aren't mentioned in history. But I think if he was around today, he would be bringing real truth to light and things that he couldn't share. And I'm doing my best to try and do that as accurately as I can. And getting that clear. I think the leadership of being so into family, and making sure that Val Thor protects his descendants and his family members, and that he is working so closely still. I think his love and passion for the human race is the greatest kind of leadership he holds. And I have so much respect for it. It makes me really emotional sometimes, especially when I feel messages coming through or through, people other than me, and people have shared it throughout the years. And it just immediately just brings up a lot of emotion because I know he's working so closely with us. So I just think, being a leader of the heart, being really, really strong as a general and doing all he could as a president, and having the appropriate outrage that helped him to warn us and connect so closely with folks like Val Thor. I mean, I just think he's a very strong spiritual being, and his heart's in the right place. And he's not into the hierarchy. He doesn't consider himself any more special than anybody else. And I think he really encourages everybody to wake up to who they really are, and for us all to work together as a global family. I don't have any ownership because I'm related to him. To me, we're all family, and he's like a father in many ways to all of us, as much as I feel the affinity of soul family that feel, like they're spiritual parents to me. It's just like, I just feel like there's a lot of lack of programming and indoctrination and the MK Ultra aspect that we see in some of these presidential lines. And I just see the clarity and the pureness, but also the pain and struggle of not being able to contend with these dark forces that really didn't allow him to accomplish what he wanted to in his administration. But this is where we're picking up the baton and doing all we can to bring about something good for humanity. But it's pretty tough. People are falling for this crap. It's really hard to witness.
Yeah, it is pretty tough to witness. Now, you talked a little bit earlier about the Christ Sophia energy and how you have a role to kind of like introduce that. That was part of the reason that they wanted to recruit you from Mars, because they wanted to take you off from Earth. And that kind of raises the question, well, is this something that we are currently going through right now? I mean, I know from back in the early 80s, you had the Law of One material talking about our solar system entering into a region of the galaxy where, the energies would heighten, that there would be like a harvest. People have talked about the photon belt.
Oh, yeah.
People talk about, now it's all about entering the region of the galaxy and actually scientists have started to observe this and actually state that we've actually entered a region of the galaxy which has increased cosmic rays that are hitting the Earth. And so, there's a lot of kind of research saying that, well, right now, apparently we are, as a planet and our entire solar system, have entered into a very special region of the galaxy which impacts consciousness and frequency, and that we literally have the ability, if we kind of like channel our attention in the right way, to kind of like manifest the incredible future, or of course a really devastating nightmare, depending on what we manifest. So what do you have to say about that?
I love your questions. Yeah, well, that was a huge focus, understanding all that, learning about that. The Jose Arguelles book, The Mayan Factor, followed me my whole life. Well, not my whole life, but it had a lot of information about this particular window period. A lot of the things that I was being downloaded as a kid had a lot to do with this window period, which is known as the stellar activation cycle. And really, the precession of the equinoxes and overcoming, the cataclysms like Atlantis, the electrical wars, the Lemurian Holocaust, and everything that took place in the final sort of Atlantean cataclysms, it threw the planet off. And in around 5,500 years ago, the Sumerian Egyptian invasion was the final kind of blow to where we began to lose our galactic memories. Our fire codes got scrambled and became what is known as junk DNA. And all this junk DNA is actually different levels of alchemical marriage, sacred union, hierogamic union, where the electrical and magnetic energies are circulating to where we're integrating polarity and awakening this Christ Sophia divine blueprint. Sometimes the names get in the way, but basically it's where we are creating this union of polarity within ourselves, which then is able to conceive a greater energetic that can produce miracles. It's kind of like, when we bring our higher visions and ground them into the womb or the soil or the soul, we're able to manifest our own reality because we're keeping our creative channels clear and we're in alignment with source. And what's special about these times is not only did the sun start to move through the 13th sign of Fiacus, which is ruled by the ether, the Venus transits have been creating a correction of the inverted pentagram, turning it upright again, which to me is the Sophionic correction. And the ether energy ruling the 13th sign of Fiacus, it connects us to the 13th gate, which is the core sun, the diamond sun that is anchored back into the planet. So that whole concept of the return of the mother is really about the planetary consciousness, what it's activating in men and women. It's helping to heal the mitochondrial DNA, which is also connected to the ether, and the fact that the nucleic acids of our DNA are elemental. So this correction and aligning back with the ether is allowing for purification, which means we can be easily deprogrammed, easily detoxed, and we can actually have the override frequency to neutralize all this dark weaponry and assault, because we're in a stronger dimensional field and frequency that we can nullify and neutralize all these different attacks and weapons, and actually clear our systems of the nano stuff and the heavy metals, and really like overcome everything if we can just be in alignment. So these times also represent the healing of the planetary body being thrown off, and the fact that throughout the procession of the equinoxes and these corrections, that the earth is now in alignment with the galactic cores of Andromeda and Milky Way being one again, which represents the 8th and 9th chakra, which is an infinity spiral. And it also breaks down the Saturn moon matrix. So it's resolving the patriarchal program, which have impacted both men and women. It's not about men. Women have played that role and been programmed by it as well. But we're really seeing it play out. When we look at the trial of Johnny and Amber, we're really seeing the masculine and feminine duking out on the world stage, and how much people are processing and working through these distortions and dualities and polarities, to really hopefully push people into the right direction, instead of always arguing and being in the divide and conquer, being so opinionated you can't even talk to people anymore because they're taking this side or that side. It's really hard for people to kind of find a neutrality or a balance. And we can only do our best every day. But so we're in this particular window. It supposedly began around 2000, and the window is up until 2025. But I mean, to put a limit on it, I don't think really makes sense. But clearly some kind of bifurcation is happening. People who don't want to wake up, who want to comply with authority, who are afraid of their power, that don't understand that this time of awakening isn't about adopting a conspiracy theorist or having to shift your belief system in accordance with some new age BS. It has to do with your sovereignty, your authenticity, and your ability to unscramble your DNA so that you can begin to upgrade and capture and embody these greater spiritual gifts and abilities, which are going to get us out of this mess. So meanwhile, they're trying to push transhumanism, gender confusion, and this, bioweapons and everything under the sun to make sure we don't align with this. But nothing can destroy the organic ascension timeline. We can only distract ourselves away and allow our creative channels to be infected by these false narratives and psychological operations. So there's a big test for every soul right now. Are you going to choose to really be in alignment with what these times are about? Or are you going to fall prey to the bait that they're putting out there all the time to capture your soul and to modify you and degrade you to being less than human, losing connection with your soul matrix? And that's something that, hopefully the individual will be strong enough to be like, wait a second, my soul is crying out to not go down this route. And I think people are manifesting their own events to shake them loose and awaken them. And everybody's in their own timing, but it's very difficult. And that's why it's interesting to study charts, because you can kind of see, everybody's got their timeline in their personal life to awaken. But, I don't want to say we're running out of time and you better hurry up, but I mean, they're not going to stop, and it's just going to get darker and darker. And we need to pull as many away from that so we can begin to mitigate the damages and work on helping people recover from, what they've been putting in their bodies and what they've been allowing themselves to be polluted by, particularly the mind control. I feel like once a person breaks the social engineering and mind control, the frequency of the body begins to remove the foreign substances, and our power on a spirit level holds dominion over the physical. And if we can just stand into alignment, I feel like there's nothing we can't cure or heal or recover from. but we have to understand spirit holds dominion over physical matter, not the other way around. So we should be very reassured in these times that we can overcome this. It's just really hard to, have a conversation with somebody because it threatens everything that they believed in or everything that, they grew up with. And, we had to go through that, as well. We have to all be brave enough to say, wow, everything I thought I knew, maybe I don't know, and just be humble enough and not continue with these careers like being a doctor or a nurse or a teacher that is willing to comply with these dark agendas. Parents and teachers and doctors, need to be brave enough to say, I refuse to comply with this. And we can work together and build from the ground up new schools and new hospitals and starve the beast of trying to manipulate doctors and teachers into playing along with this dark narrative. But as we know, a lot of teachers and cops and doctors are planted who are a part of the deep state in these powerful positions because these ritual abuses and things are happening right under our nose. It's not just, the people we see in the public eye and the hidden ones, they're right under our nose. And sometimes I drive past certain areas and I'm like, I can just feel the energy. And I'm like, whoa, I can tell that there's some sort of dark ritual activity going on here. I mean, we hear about those kids, the Hampton cover up. They're talking about like their head mistress abusing them, sexually torturing them, pulling them out of class and trafficking them off or doing something like in a hidden room connected to the school. I mean, it's right under our nose. It's very scary how many people that are supposedly just citizens in our communities that are a part of this. And many aren't, but we need to pull the two apart so that, you know what I mean? I could just go on and on. I'm sorry.
Well, there's a lot to kind of like unpack there. I know that the deep state, the cabal, whatever you want to call them, that they've been planning for this for a long time. I mean, we know from the Law of One material that they knew back in the 80s that we would be entering this period of time where there would be this possibility of ascension of our planet going through a radical transformation. I mean, I remember, Corey Good talking about the secret space programs, identifying a region of the galaxy that we were going to start entering pretty soon, and that, and people have talked about the photon belt, that's all going to uplift us. So what that kind of like tells us is that everything that's happening right now is not accident. It's all being planned. I mean, this kind of systemic, first of all, the undermining of the Trump administration. I mean, the plan to get Hillary elected, and when that failed, then Trump comes in and they start to kind of like sabotage him, and Hillary played a role in that. The Russia collusion, which clearly was fabricated. But the problem is that the people that believed in that, what they've done is karmically they've created a chain of events that's led to Russia launching this special military operation in Ukraine. That if Trump wasn't sabotaged, and a lot of kind of liberal progressives, a lot of people that I and maybe we might kind of resonate with, that we might be very friendly with because we think very similarly in terms of social justice and compassion, but they were behind this whole Russia collusion narrative, and Trump is a traitor, Putin is this monster, and of course it meant that everything culminated in this war in Ukraine that was totally unnecessary. If Trump hadn't been sabotaged, if he was allowed to kind of continue his administration and just let it play out wherever it was going to go, you wouldn't have had this. We'd be on a different timeline where Ukraine wouldn't be in the middle of a war. So it seems that everything was set up to take out Trump because he was their big obstacle to this war in Ukraine. So now the question is this war in Ukraine, and of course the pandemic, and the gas shortages, or the fuel crises, the baby food formulas, all of that, all of these problems, is that all part of this kind of like transition? Like, are we going through a dark night of the soul? Are we going through some sort of chrysalis process, like for a caterpillar turning into a moth, into a butterfly? So what do you think's going on?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what the astrology has been. 2019, when all this kind of started, Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter were conjunct each other. And since then, Saturn and Jupiter have moved on. Saturn now is in Aquarius, and Jupiter just went into Aries, and it moves quicker. But Pluto is still in Capricorn. And so Pluto is the planet of death, rebirth, alchemy, and transformation. So in targeting this transformational process and this growth period, which involves kind of a life review and going through the dark night of the soul, because that usually has to happen before you emerge as the butterfly. Any one of us who has been through the dark night of the soul or traveled into the underworlds, you know that, it's temporary, and eventually, you're able to clear and release what doesn't serve you and rise like the phoenix and emerge like a butterfly. And that's how Pluto is. So a lot of us have a strong Pluto energy in our chart, but when we're experiencing it as a collective and these powerful alignments on top of a lot of other different planetary things, it's throwing humanity into a major growth period. So they're trying to target it with the fear of death, with censorship, with this whole symbology of covering our faces, because really this is a time to breathe in the breath of life and to really get activated by the sun and be grounded with the earth, and to really, really breathe deep, because the power of, the planetary consciousness is part of our activation process. And, also where we are, and how that relates to the photon belt and things like that, which the Mayan calendar explains. Some people have a different name for it, but it is a major activation time. So because they have knowledge of the occult and these astrological alignments, when they set up these plans in advance, they're utilizing the planetary energies to throw us into the shadow of these alignments, so that instead of emerging like a butterfly, people are like trapped in the cocoon. They're imprisoning themselves in the cocoon. They're answering to outer authority, and they're not really going through the full initiation. Instead, they're just being dictated, what to think, what to believe. And all this fear is being amped up, and all this tyranny is being amped up, like we see in Shanghai, Australia, Canada, all over the world, in certain areas especially. And so it's pushing us to the edge. And sometimes it takes adversity to begin to really, really wake up. But, it has to happen a little bit quicker, because they're going to tighten the controls as much as they can. And we just simply, can't consent. Part of the initiation includes this adversity, but it doesn't mean that any of this evil is okay at all. Some people say, we need all this darkness in order to wake up. But I think we all know that they've gone way too far. And that's why there's a lot more intervention, because they've gone way too far. The level of human trafficking, pedophilia, the way that they steer the narratives in the news, the cover-ups of the real kind of news, is just an absolute, criminal, to start indoctrinating our children so young, and just, anyway, I could keep going about that. But so, yeah, this is a powerful time of initiation. It's going to continue. The Pluto has returned to United States. Last time that happened was 1776. So everybody's going through a major initiation. But at the same time, there's the ascension symptoms or birthing pains. And for others, there's sort of like not being able to really feel into that. And they're just watching too much television, and they're just answering to whatever psychological operation and false flag, and we can see they're trying to do the gun control. Real lives are getting lost, but there's layers beneath it that look like they're all bent on making sure to remove our guns, because the minute this happens, all the celebrities are like, oh, this is so tragic. They're targeting children. We got to take away the guns. But yet these same people turn a blind eye to victims saying that they were trafficked under the Getty Museum, or they were, compromised, or witnessed sacrifices and murder and all sorts of horrific things. They turn a blind eye to that. And it just kind of makes me a little bit sick, because deep down, they really don't care. A lot of them are just really doing what they're told as far as this agenda is concerned. Some are too afraid to speak up. So, I do have compassion for some of them, but they're going along with it as well. So the false flags have always been out of control since 9/11. And, this whole thing with the Ukraine, and there's something weird about Biden's connection to the Ukraine and bioweapons labs there. I'm not quite sure about that, but yeah, it's pretty sick. And I can see why they were so threatened by Trump. But at the same time, a lot of people don't really trust him anymore because of Operation Warp Speed, and because he seemed to kind of change. But at the same time, he didn't seem to ever mandate anything. It seems like there's only so much he can actually do, but he's always supported our freedoms. And so I have nothing bad to say about the guy, that's for sure. And it's brutal. When people saying, and this is silly because I would never run for president. I don't think I'm qualified. But when people say that, it's like, I can't imagine being in that cesspool. We have to create, our leadership and full disclosure and awakening this ascension energy amongst ourselves. I don't think there's any place to really try. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, just look at what he's gone through. Look at, anybody who tries to stand up. I mean, like Reagan, gets assassinated, and JFK, of course. So it's not safe there at all.
So when do you think it's going to end? I mean, is there kind of like light at the end of the tunnel? I know that because that's one of the questions a lot of people have. When are we going to come through this? When are the white hats going to take charge? Is there anything you kind of like that you've come across in your work that suggests it's going to be soon, or is it when do you think it'll happen?
Okay, well, from talking to Dan Cooper, who says he's the senior advisor to Earth Alliance, and again, there's always discernment. I mean, he says he doesn't know everything, so some things he shares that he thinks is true, and he's just offering his opinion, which I respect. But there's some things he shares that he's absolutely like, he knows this deeper information. And so as far as the white hats are concerned and the Earth Alliance, there has to be something that is introduced to society that has to do with these more advanced type of technologies. And he's got the formula for it. And in my second book, or maybe even in this book, I kind of introduce all of this in the final paragraphs. Some things he's shared about the sphere beings, about the Earth Alliance, about the white hats, and what they have planned. But it's going to take us being able to spread these things to teachers so that they're not indoctrinating our kids. They're actually bringing something in that will help future generations to really switch on to the resources that are available, that have to do with free energy, that has to do with strong and powerful healing modalities. And I have to kind of catch up with everything that he said. And it's something that I might share before I put the book out. Maybe I'll do an article or a post to just give people a little bit more information about what I found out. But there are things in the works. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it really requires a team effort. So they have something to give to humanity that we have to be open to accepting. And people like us will be, but there's a lot of people that won't be, or they won't be allowed to, unless they break free of the system and they begin to homeschool, or we build our schools and purchase our own land and pool our resources together to do this on our own terms, to then connect with what the white hats and what the Earth Alliance has to offer us. Because there's a lot of disinfo, I think, about what the so-called white hats are doing, and some confusion about their relationship with Trump. And there's some truth to it as well. But again, a lot of disinformation gets thrown in, and a lot of the things with mass arrests or all these executions and the clearing of underground bases, he says, no, that's not happening. They can't just go in there and do that. These are the reasons why. And they have agreements to have nonviolent intervention, and it has to do with promoting the resources that are available to build that up, sort of like building the immune system so that you can wipe out the disease instead of always trying to battle it. Because, the more we try and battle this, the harder it might get, because they're not going to give up. We can't just go in there and wipe them all out. They have advanced technologies. This is a very ancient Dark Alliance and Dark Draco agenda. And they're not as equipped as they'd like to be. They do have benevolent super soldiers connected to them. He was in a 20 and back himself, and that's a long story, but it's going to take like a lot more. And if we can increase the good energies, their operations will just be nullified, because most of what they're doing in these underground bases and most of these dark technologies are to harvest and siphon our energy, and also, Kundalini. And they wouldn't have any power unless we gave them that power. So we have to figure out how to cut the cords so that their operations aren't successful, and they just have no choice but to leave, because they can no longer prey upon us and mind control us. So that is how I figure they're going to be wiped out, is when we stop giving power to these false leaders, to this false tyranny, to these false narratives and dark agendas that are masquerading as looking out for our health and well-being, which is BS. And the more people that remove themselves from it, I think that is what's going to knock them out, bring more exposure to it, to where real public arrests will happen and we can see it happening, instead of just hearing about it and hoping that it's happening. And there's a lot that they're not able to tell us right now about the operations they're doing to protect it, because if the wrong people find out, it can thwart them from being able to do certain things. So I think a lot more information will come out when it's safer.
So how do people find out more about what you're doing? If they want to contact you, if they want to watch some of your webinars or your videos, so where do people go?
Well, most everything is on my website, cosmicgaia.org. There's a few conferences this year, and I'm going to update my website. I'm going to see you in Florida at the end of October. That's going to be really amazing. And yeah, everything's pretty much on my website. I have a subscription. It's called Cosmic Gaia. And basically I do Zoom events. I do discounted readings. I do one-on-one calls. And everything I kind of can do, it really helps me to continue to do the work that I'm doing. As soon as my book's written, I'll be doing a lot more with that particular subscription. And I also have a free show. They're shifting out of conscious vitality into something new, and I'll give those updates soon, but I do a weekly show there, and I interview all kinds of people, and I'd love to have you on. I think I've texted you a few times about it, but I know you were in the middle of a move. So that is up on my website as well. And I got my YouTube channel. I'm very careful about what I put up there because of censorship, but most things on social media are under Laura Eisenhower, but I've been banned from Twitter and Instagram, but you can find me on Facebook and YouTube. Even though I lost my original Facebook account, somehow I got this one, and I'm trying to move over to alternative platforms, but it's very slow to build these new channels and alternative platforms. But yeah, I know I give very long answers, but I hope, yeah, cosmicguide.org, check it out. And my book should be out soon, everybody. And thank you, Michael, for having me.
Well, thanks, Laura, for coming on the show. I know you're an inspiration to many people. And yeah, I think everything you've experienced from your background, that connection to the Eisenhower family, I mean, that really does make a difference, because I know there's a lot of people that do remember the Eisenhower legacy and regard President Eisenhower as one of America's great presidents, especially for what he did to warn us about the military-industrial complex. And everything he said about that has turned out to be exactly right and is very pertinent to today. So thanks for reminding us about that and being a kind of bearer of that very positive Eisenhower legacy.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for all your work you've done and the incredible influence that you have in awakening humanity, and I've just really appreciated everything. And I look forward to seeing you at the end of October. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
That's right. We're going to be together at the Cosmic Gathering in October in Orlando, Florida. So yeah, we'll put up the link for that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.